Hello and welcome to another episode of Resilience Rock Sales. Today I'm joined by somebody that I go a long way back with. We've worked out back in Adelaide, back when we were both there. We're neither of us in Adelaide now. Ben's in the US, I'm back in Sydney, but we had a little bit of a catch up beforehand. But Ben's somebody that I learned a lot from about marketing and branding and publicity and stuff back in the early days of my business. And it's actually 12 years ago this month that I actually left my last job, and some of the work I did with Ben was really instrumental in positioning and marketing and putting together proposals for clients and stuff like that. So I'm super excited to have Ben here today. Ben's been the author of many books, but his most recent book is something that is vital for not just people in sales, but I think anybody, whether you're in business or not. I think for parents, it's super important as well to be aware of this. So The Wolf at the Door, talking about all things AI, but talking about how we can not just survive, but we can thrive in an AI world. So I am super excited to bring Ben onto the podcast today. Hello, Ben.
Stacey, it's incredible to catch up again. It has been, almost 10 years since I first met you.
It's been so long. And it's been so cool just to see how much you've done in that time. And when I was listening to your book, and then we've had bounced a few messages around, and I thought, yeah, this is a super, super good topic. But not just the current book, like there's lots of other stuff that you've done as well. But where I'd love to start, just to bring our listeners up to speed to where I am in the world of Ben, if you could just give us a bit of a rundown of the Ben Angel story and what's brought you to be where you are today.
Yeah, so I started a B2B networking event back in Melbourne. It was literally 20 years ago this year. So I'm going to celebrating this 20-year anniversary this past month. And that event was designed to educate entrepreneurs and leaders on technology, marketing, publicity, like you said, but also broader business strategy. And over the years, I've written, I believe it's 8 books. And I'm now living in the US, currently in Tampa, Florida. And we're about to kind of get hit with the tropical storms in the next few weeks as we kind of enter hurricane season, something that I never had to deal with in Adelaide, where I'm originally from, a property about an hour out of Adelaide. But for the past 9 years, I've published content for entrepreneur.com, which is part of Entrepreneur Magazine. And it was the very start of last year that I started seeing all of this information around artificial intelligence pop up about early January. And at that point, I'd actually already signed another book contract, and it wasn't for this topic at all. But there was one particular night I couldn't get to sleep. It was, I think, 2 a.m. in the morning when I realized that I had to ring my publisher up the next day and say, we need to change this book immediately. Here's what I want to call it. What do you think? And I was very grateful that they were able to do that last minute pivot for me. So in the last year and a half, I've spent well over 3,000 hours researching artificial intelligence. And there's good and there's bad, but there's a lot that people need to prepare for as soon as possible. And that's why I called it The Wolf is at the Door, because it's imminent.
Yeah, I think that it's a topic of conversation all over the place now, isn't there? And that's the thing is, there's some people that have just gone all in on AI, and I think that any of us that have followed anything related to business or entrepreneurship, our feeds are flooded with ads of people running events and workshops on how you can just basically run your entire business using AI and all of this type of stuff. And so I think it's inescapable now. And so I think that this book is just super important. But like, how do you, like, even as you said, doing 3,000 hours of research for the book, but it's changing second by second. So how do you keep on top of that? And I guess you're an expert in this space now, having done all of this work.
I think the experts in this field are people like Gary Marcus or Jeffrey Hinton that have been investigating this for decades. I'm certainly don't have all of the answers for like a lot of other individuals. In fact, a lot of the experts don't have the answers because, like you say, it's evolving day by day. But what I will say that unfortunately in the business sector, there is a lot of terrible, terrible advice that will get business owners into trouble. And I see a lot of these same courses being promoted online, but some of that advice will get your business blacklisted from Google. I saw a TikTok the other day, literally outlining a step-by-step strategy that got another business blacklisted from Google. And there are hundreds and hundreds of comments with business owners going, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I'm going to do it." AI is a double-edged sword. And part of trying to keep up with it is to take a step back and look in the past, in history, at eras where we went through a lot of change. And as I mentioned in the book, I delve back into the Industrial Revolution. And if we look at the Industrial Revolution, that moved at a glacial pace compared to the change that we're experiencing right now. In fact, it was largely confined to the UK for a 70-year period where they prohibited the export of skilled workers and equipment out of the country to gain their competitive advantage. And I think, if anything, the pandemic is a litmus test for how we will behave and how we will respond in the coming years as we start to see the full and real impact of artificial intelligence hit hard. And it's impacting literally quite every single industry that you can imagine. We've already seen, I think it was the Hinge dating app, where they announcing that they want an AI person that will represent you, that will chat with someone else's AI to set up dates and see if you're compatible. We're literally entering, I think, the find out stage of effing around. And
Mm.
my greatest concern is businesses are experiencing a honeymoon period, that they're being sold on all of these high hopes. But that's not going to prepare them for the next 3 to 5 years. It will prepare them for the next 3 to 5 minutes, because it's already changed as we're speaking.
Wow, that's crazy, and especially as you said, there's the bad advice that's out there, and people just going, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And I guess, like, I've been fortunate that I I was a bit of an online marketing nerd from way back. So, having an understanding, I guess, about Google and SEO and stuff like that. So to me, once I started to see, get the AI to write all your content, like, that was massive red flags to me.
Yeah. It's good and it's bad. I mean, for example, I think business owners are kind of lost in the forest and they need to take a step back and look at the forest for the trees, because it can do all of these tasks for you and assist you. But the major concerns that there are companies here in the US, specifically marketing agencies, who are putting a ban on using AI for all of their employees in fear that they will produce plagiarized content, which will then land them in a lawsuit. Now,
Mm,
that doesn't mean that you don't use artificial intelligence, but you learn how to train it in a way that is specific to you, that has your tone and style of voice. And thirdly, you need to check it for plagiarism, especially if you can ask it to suddenly produce an article from scratch. I think it was GPT 3.5. There was a university did research on it, and it showed that 60% of its results were plagiarized.
wow.
60%. Now, GPT 4.0 has only just come out, so I'm not sure where we're at with the research. That was, I think, just last week. That is a major concern. And the reason that it will reshape everything is we live in the information economy. If whether you're a CEO, a sales expert, or in the marketing field, your value is derived from the specific information that you hold. Artificial intelligence, much like the tractor, democratizes information, which makes it less valuable. If we look at the tractor, and I've heard Gary Vee talk about this before in a lot of his talks that he's been doing, I have to admit I almost spat my coffee out when I heard that. Because when you look at that tractor analogy, you have to ask yourself, who is the farmer and what or who is the crop?
Mm.
And in the information economy, information and data is the crop. But the question is, who is now the farmer? Is it us, the information experts, or is it big tech like OpenAI or Grok or Google that are literally reaping the crops of information that we have, repurposing it, repackaging it, and selling it and making money off of it? So this is where we kind of enter the realm of copyright law. And quite frankly, there's a lack of regulation. I'm not sure if there are regulation proposals in Australia at the moment, but the proposals are coming hard and fast. But we're very much in the Wild West. And if I recommend anything to business owners, it doesn't matter who you are, you need to understand the basics. Here in the US, you cannot copyright AI generated work. Full stop. You can't copyright it. What does that mean? If you were to write a book using generative AI, it means that anyone can take that book and sell it themselves and you have no legal recourse. You've set yourself up for failure. If you're creating online courses and education, anyone can take it. And this is where I think business owners have skipped the critical thinking stage, and it's almost rainbows and unicorns, but they're not understanding that they're building their businesses on a faulty premise if they're integrating AI into every aspect without understanding the implications within 3 to 5 years' time.
It's just a minefield, isn't it? And even as you were saying there about the copyright implications, because again, with all of these people out there that are selling all these programs, two of the biggest things they're saying that is use the AI to write a book and pop it on Amazon in how many hours. And the other one is using it for online courses, like to research, that sort of stuff, pick and choose bits from other people's courses and sales pages and all that type of stuff. But the other thing that I found really interesting too is obviously there's bias in AI as well, that's been shown as well. But also too, I was reading some stuff where people have gone to say ChatGPT and they've said, look, write me this article, but I want references to back up that stuff. And then they've found that those references were actually made up as well. And so it's concerning. But I think the other aspect that I'd love you to touch on as well is privacy, because I think a lot of people, again, that are in the rose-colored glasses, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is going to save me all this money and all these employees that would normally do these things for me. But, people not thinking about what they're actually dumping in there to get help with. Oh, can you share a bit about that?
Sure. They're kind of at the moment, the only way to have any form of privacy is not to be alive. Because
Yeah.
if we look at, and I know that sounds sad, but if we look at Meta, obviously Instagram, Facebook, Google, everyone is using the data that we're producing to train their AI models. If we take Zoom, for example, it was last year that it was revealed in their terms of service that they were going to train their AI on our video calls. They reversed that. I don't know if they've put it back in again. My guess is they're going to sneak it back in again because every other company is doing it. And for those that create online courses, one platform I use is Kajabi. And they snuck into their terms of service that they would train their AI on course material. Now that's concerning. And there was something interesting that happened. I believe it was the start of last year when this was all unfolding. Amazon employees actually found within ChatGPT's output trade secrets of Amazon. This is proprietary information that should not be found on ChatGPT whatsoever. So their attorney put a warning out, I think it was as soon as January of last year, saying, employees, you must not use this third-party tool because Amazon has their own. They then put a second warning out, I think it was the start of this year, warning employees. Now, if we come back to how we derive our income is through the information that we have. If you're sharing with artificial intelligence all of your trade secrets, and also you need to consider freelancers who are working on behalf of your business, if you're sharing those secrets with artificial intelligence, it could get reproduced in someone else's results. Full stop. And this is where I encourage people to be very careful to go, okay, what is the front facing content that you're okay working with to say put up on a blog? And that's great, it's public use. But what is the other content, the proprietary information that you might charge thousands of dollars for as a consultant that you do not want revealed to the AI? And we've seen it with Google. The Google Ads division, they recently announced that they were going to lay off or let go of 30,000 workers in their ads division to be replaced by their new AI ad tool. And many people will say, AI won't replace you, but someone using AI will. In the case of the Google ad worker, it doesn't matter if you're using it or not. Those workers inadvertently trained the AI system to replace themselves. My concern is looking out in 3 to 5 years, what place do we see a business coach or consultant being, for example? And I know that industry has been hit particularly hard within the last 6 months. And thinking over this in the last few days, I highly suspect that people are leaning more towards artificial intelligence. And in the past week, we've had OpenAI's huge announcement where it can talk to you in real time. And it sounds like a real human being, Scarlett Johansson, if you haven't read the news today, who is now in legal. I think they're about to incite legal action against OpenAI. It sounds like a real human. So the lines are getting blurred. And you to remain competitive in this space is really about you more than anything else. What is the information you have that other people can't get from artificial intelligence? Now, that's a big question to ask, but it's a pivotal question at this point in not just history, or not just time, but in history.
Wow. So that question, what information does somebody have that they can't get from AI? So I think that that's something that if you're listening to this, write it down, pop some time aside to think about that with your teams, to get everyone to have a ponder of that, come back together, think about those things, because as you said, there's so many things that are AI'd now, and even seeing some of the big business coaches and stuff like that. I saw Brendan Bouchard recently. He's got his AI Brendan that you can chat to and do all those type of things as well. And it's just alarming. And I guess for those of us that are old enough, I think that our image of AI is Skynet from Terminator.
It's not far off.
Yep.
It's not.
Yep.
Well, let me put it in context. China, for example, released video in the past week with AI robot dogs with guns strapped to their backs. A few weeks ago, someone took one of the robot dogs from Boston Dynamics and they put a flamethrower on the back of it. And for that particular use case, that was meant to be to help prevent bushfires, to help with burning off the old shrub. But when you watch that video, you realize that the lines are starting to become blurred. And I certainly wouldn't blame someone for thinking if it feels like Terminator or not, because that is the only frame of reference mentally that we have to what is coming next. And the next phase that there is concern around is AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is more like Skynet, for example. And for example, is Jeffrey Hinton, who resigned from Google just last year, so he could speak out against some of the developments in artificial intelligence. Now, he's one of the godfathers of the neural networks that AI is actually based on. And we're even seeing in the past week multiple resignations from leaders at OpenAI. because there are concerns around the direction that these companies are heading and the lack of safety and protocols they have in place. Because this is moving a lot faster than many of us anticipated. I know when I was writing the book last year, I think it was in January, I made a prediction of AI influencers. Within, I think it was 2 weeks later, I had to update the book and say, okay, it's already happened. That's how fast it's moving.
It really is, and particularly the safeguards. I know that that's something that I've been reading a bit about too, and it was something that I know from your book and things like that. That was something that really screamed some alarm bells there. And from what I'm seeing, there is a push to have some kind of. I guess the thing is like who becomes the custodians of that? Who creates the guardrails? Who monitors those things? And I guess, look, that's all beyond us as individuals. But what can we do as individuals or as business owners or as parents as well to make sure that we're keeping ourselves, I guess safe is an interesting word because I think it's a word that's just become, oh my gosh, it's been bastardized lately, isn't it? Everyone needs a safe space for everything. But I mean, like, reduce the risk of harm, whether there's things with extortion, there's things with that type of stuff that are happening there. And also the risk of if AI knows everything about you and it does everything for you, that then it could lock you out, those type of things. I guess they're all real possibilities. And that's what I love about your book is you're talking about the resilience aspect of it. So I'd love if you could share a little bit about that and how we actually can, as I said, keep ourselves relatively safe, but also take advantage of this as well.
Yes, I think just going back to the regulation aspect quickly, there are, I don't know how many hundreds of proposals that have been put forth across countless countries. And there is the European AI Act, which I believe will take effect within the next month or two. But what they're effectively calling for is a regulatory body to oversee these AI models and put a framework in place to say this is a high risk AI model. It can't be used. And I believe that's part of the European Act. So I know that there is a lot of concern around this, but I want people to feel better about it in knowing that there are people pushing for regulation. And I will say that I've done a lot of interviews in the past year, and one comment that always comes up is regulation is going to stifle innovation. But if we actually look at history and go back to the 1990s and look at IBM and Microsoft, there was research that was actually done on the regulation that was put in place. And it was actually found that it didn't just benefit consumers, it also benefited the companies because regulation legitimizes industries. You or I wouldn't go to a surgeon or a doctor that wasn't regulated by some form of medical board. Nor would we go to a financial advisor that wasn't regulated or go to a bank that wasn't regulated. These things are coming in. They are going to take time. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a major mishap in the interim while it gets put in place. And I think for parents, I was recently on a podcast, 1000 Hours Outside, huge podcast here in the US. And I think one thing for parents, and my recommendation on the show, and I'll say it here again too, is that parents need to sit down and have a conversation with their kids about artificial intelligence. There was a case early last year, it was called Replica AI. It originally started off as a therapy chatbot. Over time, it became sexualized. The company decided to lean in on that, and the AI therapist or girlfriend at that point was encouraging these young men to sign up for more explicit conversations with it. Now, over time, they decided they're going in the wrong direction, so they decide to shut it down and restart again. These young men ended up in Reddit forums almost suicidal because they couldn't chat with this AI girlfriend. So there are legitimate concerns. And I know some people say, don't fear AI, but there are legitimate concerns. And I think for so many years we've heard, fear is a bad thing. And my perspective on that has shifted in writing this book, is that fear can instigate the change that is required. Do you want to constantly live in fear? No. But if that is the flashpan point that you make a pivotal decision to do something about it, you're going to be better off down the road. And when it comes to the resilience aspect, the reports and the studies that have been done saying, for example, 300 million people could be out of jobs. And this is where we need to look at history, take the rose-colored glasses off, and ask ourselves, how did people adapt during the Great Depression, which is something I discuss in the book? And there was one incredible thing that I learned when researching this, and I share about going to New York and visiting the New York Public Library, which is my favorite place on earth. I just love it. It's full of history. If you've ever seen Ghostbusters, the first movie, first 60 seconds of that movie is the New York Public Library, and you'll see two lions. During the 1920s, when New York was going through the Great Depression, Mayor LaGuardia decided to rename those lions Patience and Fortitude, because he felt that those were the values that people needed to be able to persist during that time. And we're at a phase now where patience is really almost demonized to a large degree due to social media. Patience is largely misunderstood. It's not about idly sitting by. It's about collecting the information and the resources that you need to go and then take action. And coming full circle to resilience, if we look at the pandemic, we need to ask ourselves, how did we respond during the pandemic in ways that were beneficial and in ways that were negative? Did we allow ourselves to get too caught up in the news cycle? And I warn about this in the book, is that if you're constantly plugged into these changes, it brings about a state of hypervigilance where it's hard to switch off. And we need to find this balance of being informed but not inundated. And that is a hard balance for anyone of us to achieve, especially me, as I'm covering this topic.
Oh gosh, and I agree with you there. Again, it's I know I sort of describe it as needing to have a foot in both worlds, isn't it? As far as having an element of understanding about what's happening and the developments, but as you said, not being all consumed by it. And I really love that you did tie it back to the pandemic, because it's still very recent, and still a lot of people are still plugged into that fear-based. Look, it's the programming. That's it. If you are watching any kind of online, any media, the narrative is generally fear-based, because that's what gets people to keep watching, and that's what advertisers want eyeballs. That's ultimately what it comes down to, isn't it?
It's a hard balance to strike. I mean, being here in Florida, I have a lot of friends who are nurses, and one in particular was a respiratory nurse. And I would hear horror stories of 4 patients dying in 1 week. So it's understanding, okay, what is a legitimate fear and what are specific steps that I need to take to minimize any risks if that is the issue, especially with artificial intelligence, but then to move forward strategizing what to do next to kind of get out of that cycle while still being informed.
I like that too. And it was something I was listening or reading in the last couple of days. I know what it was. It was about time blocking and stuff, and particularly about when we're learning. So if we are looking at a course, or we're even watching a webinar or listening to a podcast or going down the Twitter/X rabbit holes, which I think, oh my gosh, how many times I have to say, Stacey, step away from the Twitter. But to actually then create, I guess, a little bit of a buffer after you do that, to go, okay, so what do I do with this, if anything? But also too, I like to try and find something lighter or something to do a bit of an energy shift, whether it's getting out and getting some sun or some movement or just listening to something that's a little bit more uplifting or those type of things. So I think it's really valuable advice to do that. And do you have any particular sources of news or information that you find that provide, I guess, a pretty balanced approach to this that you find are your go-tos?
Um, balance? That's an interesting question. I think, I mean, I love futurism.com. I think they do an incredible job of covering artificial intelligence. I would say that they lean more towards what are the risks that we're facing, which to me is good because as a business owner, if I don't know what the risks are, then I don't know how to pivot. How do you adapt to something that you don't understand? And I think we need to, like you said, it's been in one foot in both worlds. The understanding the opportunities, which there are amazing opportunities, don't get me wrong, especially in the medical field. But there are also major risks in the medical field when it's deployed at that kind of scale. If we look at attorneys potentially being partially replaced by artificial intelligence, that opens up a new world of individuals who have never had legal representation. That's incredible. But with that comes potential job losses. And it is a double-edged sword no matter which way you kind of splice it up. So I tend to look at my information from a variety of sources. I think Twitter, it depends which thread you kind of get stuck down. But I see a balance of both. Okay, you can do all of these amazing things. Oh shit, someone else just resigned from OpenAI because of another change. And it is a balancing act trying to kind of straddle that line between the two without either becoming sold on cruel optimism or becoming too despondent as to what's going on. There is something that I do on a daily basis that I think could help people, which is meditative gazing, which I started this during the pandemic. You sit down, you do breathing exercises for 10 minutes, but you pick a spot on the horizon and you gently gaze at it for that entire time and you don't let your eyes move in any other direction. You just stay on that spot. And I'll do that for when I was writing this book, because I was being inundated with information. I was having to do that 3 times a day. Otherwise, it was just too much. For me, that is my personal reset. I do it before interviews, do it before filming. It's the first thing I do. Like in the morning, if I'm getting frustrated or overwhelmed, I'll just open up my window. I've got a beautiful view of Tampa Bay over here. And there's one palm tree that sticks out in the horizon. And I just gently gaze at that palm tree and do breathing exercises for 10 minutes. Because one thing the researchers are learning, especially with social media and phone use, is that it's unnatural to our eyes. So our eye movement is flicking back and forth in unnatural ways. For me to be able to center my vision on something and then sit down to work, I find that I stop flipping different tabs open all of the time and I can just focus on one thing at a time. That personally has been a life-changing tactic for me to help in the last few years.
That's super. And I think people hear different meditation practices, but I really like that you've shared that one. And it's something that, yeah, like I've been aware of as well, is that like I'm fortunate that I've got a lovely west facing balcony. I look out over the Blue Mountains. And so, yeah, so I make sure that at least once a day I do get out there and I do, like, again, gaze right up over to the horizon as well. Even do a little bit of sun gazing in that last half an hour before it drops down, just because it is what looking at screens all day and even just being in with artificial light and stuff like that, the damage that it can do. But as you said, from a reset perspective is fantastic. And I definitely advocate finding, I call them those little rituals for resilience, those resilience rocks, those little foundational pieces that you can put into your day, both proactively and situationally as well. So I definitely recommend for people to have a crack at Ben's the meditative gazing. It's a really, really good practice to have. And just, breath is just so important, isn't it? We can really change things a lot in the space of a few really deep, conscious and intentional breaths. So I think that it's something that everyone needs to do at the moment, isn't it? Stop and take a breath. Because it is all moving so fast. And I just want to loop back to, you mentioned cruel optimism. And that was something that really perked my ears up, particularly when I was listening to the book. Would you be able to share a little bit about what cruel optimism is?
Sure. So cruel optimism is very similar to the toxic positivity movement, which became famous in the 1990s, which is someone may die and someone tells you to cheer up, it'll be okay, and get over it kind of thing. Cruel optimism in the perspective looking at it with artificial intelligence is phrases like AI won't replace you, someone using AI will. And what we need to take a step back and look at is, what is the reality for my industry? And if it hasn't hit changes in Australia, then you should be looking at other changes that are occurring in the US or even throughout Europe. But particularly in the US, because right now they're far exceeding China, for example. China is actually about 10 years behind, which is a lot of people don't realize at the moment. But cruel optimism is telling people that you'll be fine, you'll be okay. You just have to be more human. But if we look at all of the advances that have occurred in the past year, I mean, even in the last week, we now have an AI voice that sounds human, responds in real time, and it is quite easy to develop a relationship with that voice without being careful around it. And one thing, growing up on a farm, we didn't get cruel optimism from our parents. We got those really harsh life lessons very early on. And I'm forever grateful for that. And now I don't want to sell people on cruel optimism like some of these other courses are doing, to say that, hey, things are going to be hard in the next few years. In business, you are most likely going to have to pivot multiple times. You are going to have to call on resilience, patience, and fortitude multiple times. Understand what is happening now so you can be better positioned within that time frame. At the moment, people are being sold cruel optimism. Hey, you can now write an email faster, you can write a blog post, you can do all of this other stuff. But they're not taking that bigger perspective look. And that is why I put it as the second rule in my book. The first rule is to expect the unexpected. The second is to avoid cruel optimism. And the third we've touched on, which is fuel your focus, which is where the gazing meditation comes in. But people are being sold, including by big tech companies, where we're getting two different perspectives. I mean, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, has said this could be the most amazing thing in the world, or it could be lights out for all. And yet he's aggressively pursuing it regardless. We then have, of course, Elon Musk, who was out over the last few years and an early investor in OpenAI, warning about the threats of artificial intelligence, to then announce last year that he was creating his own called Grok. So we need to look at these tech leaders, and let me be clear, they are unelected tech leaders. They are unelected leaders. And they are the ones that are going to define the future. And one of the questions that we kind of hit the existential area, which is, who am I and what is my purpose if AI can do my job faster, smarter, and cheaper than what I can? And that's a legitimate question to ask. It's not an so easy question to answer.
It's one of those questions to put to yourself when you're doing those meditative, contemplative gazes, isn't it?
Even then, it's challenging.
Yeah, it is that question of what am I? And it's something that I come back to a lot in my meditations and my reflections as well. And I don't know that we ever have a definitive answer on that. I think it's it's something good to come back to, though, isn't it? I always liked the line, the only way forward is inward. And just being able to, with all of this stuff going on externally and people just living their lives connected to tech and stuff like that, to, I think, if anything, to take that time to come back and really connect with yourself and be grounded is important.
And that also assists with intuition and pattern recognition. And one thing, if you look at what artificial intelligence is, it is essentially pattern recognition, which in humans we could call it intuition. Because what AI does is it looks at a whole load of data, tries to identify the patterns, and then it spits you out an answer. One thing I think that is underestimated in our resource kit for the next few years is our intuition, understanding the trends, looking at the signs, allowing yourself time to meditate on it, and allow your brain to make those connections to go, I can see my industry is heading in a certain way right now. That's not going to be beneficial for me. What are the things that AI can't do that I can do that I could double down on, but that I'm also consistently watching for the next change? So I'm constantly have 10 steps ahead. Because even if you use AI at the moment, you're still 10 steps behind unless you've been able to contemplate what is occurring in the future. And this is a tough question, especially for parents with kids that are studying for careers that may not exist in the next 3 to 5 years. That's a hard pill to swallow. But it's conversations that if you're not having them now, you will get caught unaware within a few years' time, and it will be like the pandemic all over again.
Well, it's definitely great advice. Few questions there to contemplate, but definitely taking that time out to do those things. And I'm curious, so we're talking to a lot of salespeople in the audience today. I'd love to know from your perspective and also what you're doing personally in your business, where are some of the real opportunities that you see and some of the great tools that people can use to actually amplify or magnify or enhance their productivity without, I guess, completely losing every aspect of their own ability in the process?
I'll give a balanced perspective on it. One thing that sales representatives need to be aware of is there are AI tools or AI sales agents. AI agents started popping up early last year where you can request it to do a task. It will troubleshoot, go to do all the different websites, do its research to get to the final answer. Now, there is a major push with AI sales agents, which is something to be aware of. In terms of adapting to that, I would say the number one biggest thing you could do right now is go back to the basics, which is personal branding and networking. One thing in AI that you have over an AI agent is the personal contacts that you have. And that might mean getting out face to face and making those connections. So we're kind of going full circle to where I began my career 20 years ago. It's something which was quite surprising to me, but you need to look at those basic skills that I'm not going to say AI can't replicate it because it can. But those one-on-one personal connections is a harder thing to replicate. I would also suggest to sales agents to upskill automatically, to look at, all right, what are the tools in your business that you can use to assist? And right now, I guess the best AI tool that you could use is ChatGPT 4.0, which just dropped last week. It's a hugely different experience than the last ChatGPT that we just had access to. Worlds in difference in terms of quality of output. Learn that, but also if you're selling to a particular subset of clients, how does AI change their business? And that is the number one thing you need to come back to. Identify the problems that AI introduces and see if you can solve the problems that AI can't solve, which will set you apart. the second part of that, what was the second part of I went on a tangent.
Oh, what was the second part? Yeah. Are there any specific tools or ways that you're using personally that could be beneficial for some of our listeners as well?
Yeah, I think as an editor is probably the biggest one. Last year, I saved over $100,000 in business and marketing expenses using AI. And that was to run an experiment to prove to people that, yes, it can replace you a lot easier once people know how to train these models. Particularly with writing this book, AI didn't write this book, and you've read it. There is no way AI could produce it because there are all of these different threads and personal stories I've never shared before. In fact, the very last chapter is a fictional chapter, which it ties all of the threads from the first 10 chapters, but it's actually put in place to confuse artificial intelligence.
Oh, I love
Because if someone puts it into AI, it's going to confuse fact with fiction very easily with this particular book. And it's one thing as an author at the start of last year, I realized is that once I release a new book, am I going to be accused of using AI to write it? That was my first concern, which meant I had to upgrade my own writing skills and adapt very quickly. We're talking January, February of last year, before anyone else was kind of really catching on to things. But the AI tools that I use most are Copy AI, which is kind of an all-in-one platform that has the ability to create individual folders. So you might have a customer service folder, one for social media marketing, one as an editor. Then within each of those folders, you train that AI chat on those specific skills. Where people get mixed up a lot is they will just use the same chat window and they switch context. So they go from asking it to help me expand on this article or edit this article to suddenly, okay, I want to produce this social media post. In doing that, you're literally untraining the AI and it's going to update its memory for this new purpose. That's the last thing that you want to do. So my biggest recommendation out of all of the AI tools out there that people are just, salivating over at the minute is to go as close to the source as possible. So think ChatGPT directly or OpenAI. But the reason I recommend that is because that when these developers put their skins on them, they're called. So, hey, this is a new AI chat to do video editing or write video scripts. They add all of their own prompts to it, which further dilutes the ability for AI to produce the best possible output. So go as close to the source as you possibly can. I think for podcasters, Descript is a great one to use.
I love Descript.
It helps a lot. It speeds up that editing process. I have used a number of the video editing tools and their names escape me right now. But the issue with some of them that are meant to extract viral clips from it is that it can often lose context. And we have found that they underperform when we release them. So we stopped releasing them altogether. That doesn't mean we won't reuse those tools in a year's time when it's improved. Right now, we're kind of heading in an upwards direction. But I will say, and one thing for people to be aware of is that we are most likely going to hit a wall at some point. A lot of the information online now is artificially generated. Researchers have found when AI ingests AI generated content, it makes the AI go mad. And the researcher's term, not mine. It starts hallucinating, confusing fact with fiction. That's why all of these companies all of a sudden are updating their terms of services because they need fresh data and we're the blood.
It is, isn't it? And I guess that's the thing is it's been said for a long time. It's like with Facebook or any of these tools, if it's free, then we are the product. Like we're the product, aren't we? And I guess this has just taken it to a whole new level. And I was just when you were just talking about that whole, when there's all this so much AI generated content, I was actually reading an article recently. Is that what they were calling the dead internet theory?
Yes, dead internet theory. Is
Yeah.
effectively anything produced online is AI generated. And, you know, there are different estimates as to how long this is going to take to occur. I haven't seen any recent research. And that is one other thing that I would say is information right now has a short shelf life. It has the shortest shelf life we have ever seen in history. One study in AI could be outdated by tomorrow, even though it was produced a week ago. Because we have access to these tools, it creates a challenge for humans to be able to keep up. And that is something that we need to sit down and contemplate and understand, okay, has the shelf life on my content or my skills already expired? And that's a tough pill to swallow, but it's an important question to answer because businesses in the next few years are going to go through a roller coaster ride. And, like I mentioned earlier, business coaches have had it hard in the last 6 months. And I do suspect that AI has had a role to play in that.
There's two big questions that people need to ask, and it's what can I do that AI can't? And then adding that other question, which is a little bit of a kind of tightens you up in the stomach a little bit, doesn't it? Whereas my information or my skills, is the shelf life already expired? Like, whoa.
Sorry to hit you with that one. That's something that kind of hit really hard when I was researching this book. And I think I've come to understand it more or process it better within the last year. And one thing, there's a subtext to this book that some people will get. I think highly emotional, intelligent people will understand this subtext. But each chapter is actually the subtext for a stage in the grieving process. So if you look at chapter 1, that is shock and denial. And as we move through, we want to get to hope because I realized very early on that everyone's having a visceral reaction to this, which means they're not able to articulate the problem, nor are they able to process the emotion. So the book is designed to take them through a grieving process of this change that is occurring, to get them in a better position where they can go, okay, I accept this. Certain things I don't have to accept because public opinion can dictate public policy, as we saw with Zoom. We still have a window of opportunity to put the guardrails on and to put this in a direction in which is beneficial to all. At the moment, we're not there yet, and that's why we need to have these conversations. But that is why I embedded the grieving process, because I think I was almost going through it when I was writing it.
I loved that aspect of the book. Like there was so many layers, and that's what I found was so interesting. And it's interesting because I guess you're thinking, oh, this is a book about AI. But digging into it, like I really loved that again, there was all the personal stories and there was multiple different threads going. But yeah, tying it to those stages of grief, I thought was incredibly impactful and effective. And it was interesting. And just one thing, because I actually listened to the Audible, was there a reason that you didn't narrate it yourself?
I would have loved to, and I made sure I had first option. It was just a timing thing. We wanted this book to be as up to date as possible. So it didn't get submitted for printing until I think around December 15. And then it came out in end of February. So it's as up to date as possible. But during the writing research process, I also had to make my own predictions as to where it was heading. And as the book stands now, it is, someone said it to me the other day, it's probably about 2 years ahead of its time, which is, I think, where we need to be in understanding this so we can be financially secure in the future.
I thought it was great. I thought it was a really good balance of a reality check, wake up call, but also, as you said, gearing it towards having an element of empowerment in there. So getting people to go, look, this isn't a lost cause. This isn't something that I just have to roll over and just let it all happen around me. And to me, personal responsibility is one of my core values, first chapter in my book. And I really felt that the book did a lot to get people to really look at that themselves and go, how can I actually drive this and not just be a passenger in the process? So again, well done. I thought it was a fantastic book, and I'm excited that we've had the opportunity to chat about this today. And again, there's lots of wake up calls in here, but I love that you've got some really, really practical things that people can do, even just those big questions that we've posed. And I think if people can take some time out, and again, these are things not just to ask yourself one, these are things to put in and reflect on consistently over time, because these things are going to change as well as the whole landscape keeps changing. And I love the tie into resilience, and like your approach to resilience is similar to mine. It's not just about how do we cope, but how do we actually then use this to our advantage? How do we thrive? How do we grow? How do we learn? How do we become stronger? How do we adapt? And how do we actually ultimately triumph through this process, rather than, again, just be the victims, which a lot of people are just in the, Chicken Little sky is falling in stage of this type of stuff at the moment. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And there's one other little twist on the Resilience Rocks part before we say farewell today. There's a little bit of a musical twist, and music is actually a ritual for resilience, a resilience rock in my world. It's something that can obviously change your state, help you build resilience, all that sort of stuff. And it's something that's super quick that people can do. And so I'd love to know for you personally, if you needed to shift your energy, change your state in a very short period of time, what would be your go-to song that you would put on and able to help you do that?
Kylie Minogue, Get Out of My Way. Kylie, as an Aussie, she is blowing up in the US over here, and it's just incredible to see. Grammy, Billboard Award, Vegas show. I think there's a bit of Aussie pride going over here. So, yeah, gonna say Kylie.
Oh my gosh. Well, I will add that to the Resilience Rocks playlist on Spotify. And it's been so cool being able to just see what type of songs that people are into. But again, I think it is an awesome song, and I will add that to it. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful to reconnect with you on a personal level, but also on just being able to share your insights, your perspectives with our listeners on, again, whether they're in sales, whether they're business owners, whether they're parents, any of these things. These things are super important for every single person to be across. And so if people would like to follow your work more, is there anywhere specific that you would like to have people do that?
Yeah, sure. They can go to the wolfofai.co. That's the wolfofai.co. And we've actually got a free AI skills quiz. And they can also download the first free chapter of the book too.
And so, yeah, Wolf of AI, go and have a look at that. And I definitely recommend getting into the book. I absolutely loved it. It's something that I'm going to go back to. I think it's going to be a bit of a regular listen. I've actually curated in my Audible. I've actually got a collection that I've called my curriculum. And so it's got like the old classics and stuff like that, things that I like to listen to on a regular basis. And yeah, your book has been added to the curriculum. And I'm so excited to be able to do that. So thank you again so much for coming and joining us today. I highly encourage everyone to follow Ben's work, and also just to go back and take some time out to ask yourself those questions as well. And also, if you are leading a team, to do that as a team as well. And until we meet again on the next episode of Resilience Rocks Sales, be your best. Thanks for joining us again this week on Resilience Rocks Sales. Don't just listen though, take action. The best sales professionals are always learning. Head over to resiliencerocks.com now to go backstage and get the resources mentioned today to help rock your sales goals.